Steve, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, buddy.
Hey, it's been a couple years since we did our Metal Gear Solid 2 review. Do you think we should do a review of Metal Gear Solid 3 before the remake comes out?
I think it's time. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Over and out.
Boss, why are you doing this?
Why? To make the world one again.
To put it simply, in order to avoid a full-scale nuclear conflict, we have to prove that America was not involved in that explosion.
And eliminating the boss ourselves will prove America's innocence?
You're the only one capable of pulling this off. You were her last apprentice.
What's the story between you and the boss?
She was like a mother, and my master.
And your lover?
It went deeper than that. Half of me belongs to the boss.
Do you love her?
No, nothing like that.
Do you hate her?
Does it have to be one or the other? Love or hate?
Between a man and a woman? You bet.
For 10 years, we lived and died together. You couldn't possibly understand.
And you think you can kill her now? That's your mission, isn't it? Assassinating the boss.
The world was once one. We will heal that rift and make the world whole again. To do this, we need strength. An unstoppable trump card with enough power to bring order to the world. That trump card was to be the Shagohod and the Cobra unit.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the All-Time Gaming Series. I'm Steve Cravens.
And I'm Andres Gallego, aka Gallego.
And today we are doing something that we have been planning to do for, at this point, it feels like years. We're going to be talking about Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Now, before we begin, since we've been talking about this for years, as a matter of fact, when we did Metal Gear Solid 2, that was back during the pandemic. That was back during November of 2020.
Yeah.
And we talked about that. But Andres has wanted to do this thing where he sends me a package, much like Snake gets packages out in the jungle, and he wanted me to open it right here on the video. So without further ado, he sent the package. It actually says open on May 10th, but we're recording a day early today. We're recording on May 9th, so let's see what's going on here.
There's a lot of packaging on this one.
There is a lot of packaging on this one, but I can see what's in it, and it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I figured before we did this review, you needed something to keep your energy up in very much the same way that Snake needs his energy and his stamina up during the Virtuous and Snake Eater missions.
Well, you know what, man? Usually I would save something like this, but I think because it's during the review, I think this is actually totally appropriate that I eat it during the review. So, all right, so we got to keep our energy up. So I'm going to keep this handy right here.
Yes.
Yes. We're talking about Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Now, Andres, this is a game that is still revered by gamers all around the world, millions and millions of gamers, billions, I would dare say. And it's, forget about one of the greatest sequels, some might say prequels of all time. It is a prequel, but, you know, it is one of the greatest games ever made, period, regardless of whether you look at it as the prequel or the sequel, even though it is a prequel. It is just it's one of those legendary games where if you're truly worth your salt as a gamer, you're going to know what the hell we're talking about with Metal Gear Solid 3. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how young you are. I mean, if you haven't heard of this game, you're actually kind of in luck because there's a remake coming out. But anyway, so the game actually came out in November of 2004 and actually came out a couple weeks after Halo 2, as I recall.
Yeah, I think it came out virtually around the same time, like maybe a week or so before.
Yeah, and I actually remember vaguely, I remember Kojima saying something to the effect of, you know, we know that millions of people are going to be buying Halo 2 and, you know, that's where the hype's going to be, but don't worry, we're going to be bringing something that's going to more than hold its weight when going up against Halo 2 because we're going to be able to do things that Halo 2 can't do. You know, and actually, Andres, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong or not, but Kojima was not always set in stone to direct this one. I remember after MGS2, there was actually rumors that he would produce MGS3 and maybe be involved with the story, but it wasn't always guaranteed that he would direct it. But I'm obviously we're all over the moon that he did direct it. I think that ended up being the case with MGS4 as well, where he wasn't sure if he was going to direct it. There was going to be a co-director, a younger director. He ended up, directing it. But thank God that he directed it, because it is his Star Wars. It is intrinsically his. It's come from his mind. Without Metal Gear Solid, without Hideo Kojima, is not Metal Gear Solid. As far as
it's his legacy, absolutely. And yeah, there was a time very briefly where he kind of felt that he had done everything that he possibly could in terms of gameplay. And he's one of those people or one of those artists, if you will, that essentially whenever he sets his mind to something, he will not go into a project unless he has something new to offer or even just a story to tell. And looking at MGS3 and looking at MGS4 in particular, those are big leaps of faith between the two installments. And then the thing is, when you look back at MGS1 to MGS2, there's certainly refinements here and there, but you could almost say that it was kind of an evolution, whereas I think between MGS2 and MGS3, there is a big step in terms of the gameplay and in terms of even the storytelling as well. And same thing for Metal Gear Solid 4, and we'll get to Metal Gear Solid 4 at a later time for sure.
Hopefully it won't take 5 years, but yeah. And you know what? I just want to talk about the build-up, leading, like the hype about it, because even though at this point it's almost 21 years ago that it came out, I mean, this might sound weird, but I mean, I was so hyped for MGS2 right before it came out, especially with, the PS2 being brand new. And as we talked about in our previous review of it, I mean, the demo disc that came with the Zone of the Enders, really showing you how fluid and how fresh the gameplay felt. The graphics, obviously, incredible, but the gameplay itself felt so much more streamlined. It's so much more, fluid than the OG Metal Gear Solid, even though you could, it felt like the beginning of a new era in gaming with MGS2. So for me personally, with the anticipation of MGS3, it wasn't even necessarily about the story. It was more about what I had heard about Kojima well, let's talk about this. With Metal Gear Solid games, the environments are critical because it's a stealth game. Yes, you can get into full-blown, shootouts and explosions and, CQC, all that stuff, which was introduced in this game, but it's really about stealth. It's really about utilizing the environment to your advantage and going undetected. The word had come out that Kojima, since this was going to take place in the jungle among other locations, you were really going to be able to utilize your surroundings in a way that you couldn't previously in Metal Gear Solid and Metal Gear Solid 2. So that's really what I was kind of intrigued about. That's what really kind of had me, hyped up, was like, how is Kojima going to push this forward? How is he going to, make something that we've really grown accustomed to in Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 with the stealth and the boxes and whatnot? How is he? And we're going to talk about it more in depth, but in terms of what I was anticipating, and it just sounds weird to say because it has the best boss fights ever. It's got a great story, but 15-year-old Steve that's what I was anticipating, and that's what I was looking forward to, was just, the revolution in gaming that he was going to bring. What about you, Andres? What were you looking forward to? Was it the gameplay? What were you looking forward to the most before the game came out?
Well, probably the biggest thing that I was looking forward to before the game came out was the idea that Hideo Kojima was going to create a stealth action game where you had to hide in plain sight. And knowing the mechanics of Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, that is a very interesting concept where it's like, how do you hide in plain sight? And it wasn't even fathomable what he was thinking in terms of like using the camouflage, using the environment, using small little distractions here and there all over the place, and also using creatures as well too to create distractions. This game really, in terms of the stealth aspect of it, really opened up the possibilities of what you can do and how you can think laterally with items all around the environment, and just seeing how much detail Hideo Kojima really put into everything in every section of the game. It was something where, 15-year-old Andres way back when the day was really excited about the aspect of how this is going to play. And honestly, I was sort of a little disappointed that we weren't going to go forward in time from where Metal Gear Solid 2 took place in, because that is a hell of a sequel setup in Metal Gear Solid 2. And there was sort of a little bit of a, oh man, this is going to be a prequel and this type of thing. But, you know, we weren't prepared for the story that Hideo Kojima had in mind for this one, and how much it was going to enrich future titles along down the line. But I will say probably the big thing that was also really exciting for me was the fact that, as a big Rambo fan myself, this game truly felt like First Blood Part 2, but with a Metal Gear Solid code on it. And knowing Hideo Kojima's love for movies in general, this truly felt something that was going to be not only cinematic, but was also going to push the stealth aspect of it, and was also just really going to take some iconography from so many movies with that setting, from Apocalypse Now to Rambo. It was just going to be a meld of so many different things. And to add to that as well, that story, we were not prepared for how that story was going to go. And so the anticipation for me going forward was more like, you know, it wasn't as high as Metal Gear Solid 2, I'll say that, but it was one of those things where I was like, you know what, I can't wait to play this game. And I remember I purposely kind of avoided the trailers after the initial trailer, so I could be as surprised as I could possibly be going into this. But yeah, I was really hyped to see what the next installment was going to bring, and how Hideo Kojima was going to push stealth gaming forward.
Yeah, I mean, the word that we're going to use a lot during this retrospective is revolutionary. And I know I'm sorry to sound repetitive, but there are a lot of things. Well, there's a lot of things about every single Metal Gear Solid game that's revolutionary to one degree or another, especially with the very first game that, you know, we also talked about. But yeah, I mean, this. I'm actually kind of with you. I'm starting to remember something that I felt was, like you said, the ending of Metal Gear Solid 2 is one of those great endings where, you know, you don't just want to go back and play the game over again and experience it again. You really want to find out what happens next. So when I do remember that it was going to be a prequel. I just thought it was such an odd time to do a prequel, but, you know, because usually with prequels, they wait until the main story is concluded, usually. And then they do the prequel, and you kind of have a full picture, because the prequel, it gives context. It was just a very unusual time to do Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, then do the prequel, then do Metal Gear Solid 4. But interestingly enough, it worked out. It worked out because it made aspects of Metal Gear Solid 4 hit a lot harder than they otherwise would have if Metal Gear Solid 3 didn't come first, to give that context and give that backstory. So
absolutely, it was sort of the opposite of what George Lucas did. Whereas, you know, some of the surprises that are in store in this game truly do make certain reveals in 4 so much more valuable and so much more satisfying in the end of the day.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I'm glad that he did that, because it was unusual at the time. Looking back on it, and he probably had this planned the whole time. I mean, he knew Metal Gear Solid 3 was going to do great business, so he probably knew Metal Gear Solid 4 was inevitable at that point. But let me segue into something else too, because, you know, you mentioned movies, and you talked a lot about movies from that era in the game. You know, you talked about the original Godzilla, you talked about From Russia with Love, Dr. No, that nature. The great homage, in my opinion, to James Bond, to the 60s, in Snake Eater song. You know, how you have the opening scene of Metal Gear Solid 3, much like, you know, in the James Bond movies, they have the opening that either has something to do with the rest of the movie or it doesn't, but either way, there's that opening action sequence that really kind of kicks off the movie. And then you have the title song with the credits and everything like that. And Kojima gave us Snake Eater. So, Andres, what do you think about Snake Eater? Was it cringe? Was it great? Has it stood up? I mean, what do you think about it?
It should have been the most cringiest thing on the planet, but God, I ate it up so much. I was like, they know exactly what we want with this game and how we're going to make this so much fun going forward. And knowing that this was not only his ode to the 60s, but also his ode to the spy thrillers of back in the day. I mean, like, even so much so the point that we have in the plot itself, we have so many characters who are spies or who are just kind of like prospective people that are playing or double-sided agents all around. And knowing that this was going to be the opening, this was one of those things where as soon as you played it, you were automatically attuned to what Hideo Kojima was going to do with this. He's like, you know what? I'm going to give you a great story, but you're going to have a great time with this game.
And that's the thing about Kojima, too, is that, yes, there's some moments in his games which are very dire, very serious, but he always has fun. There's always some sort of black comedy in there, so like a lot of slapstick, too. A lot of perverted humor, too. But it's fantastic because it does set the tone. It makes you feel like, yes, you're playing a Metal Gear Solid game first and foremost, but to give it that early 60s feel, just like Connery's Bond movies, that was a great touch. That was to just completely embrace the era in which he is setting his game and to make us nostalgic for those Bond movies, but also kind of like give it like an updated feeling because we're, at the time we were playing a brand new game. It was just a great story. And yes, the song itself, the theme of it fits perfectly, and it still holds up. Me personally, man, I remember when it came out, there were some people just like, oh god, what are we doing here? I don't know how to feel about it. Like it feels like out of place. Listen, if it feels out of place, that's fine. For those of us who love Bond movies, who grew up in Connery's Bond movies, it hit different. So I'm glad, and again, it still holds up in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. And even my wife, who has never played any Metal Gear Solid game beforehand, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, that's kind of a catchy song.
It's really catchy. And I think the more you listen to it, the more you tend to vibe with it. Like, you know what I mean? If you just heard it once or twice, but like you really, and we're going to talk about it later, there's a part of the game that has become legend, infamous really, where it comes back. And if you hated that song when you first heard it, when you're playing that aspect, you're going to hate it even more. But anyway, we'll get to it. But, before we get to, I know I was talking about the gameplay and I was excited for the gameplay, things of that nature. But why don't you, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the game, want to refresh or anything like that, why don't you kind of give like a brief synopsis of what the game is actually about? Like, what is the plot? Like, how does it carry over? Like, just give us a brief summary of the plot before we delve into the nitty gritty.
All right. Well, Snake Eater is set during 1964, during the height of the Cold War, and it follows a legendary U.S. operative codenamed Naked Snake as he is deployed into deep Soviet territory on something called the Virtuous Mission. His objective on the Virtuous Mission is to rescue defected scientist Nikolai Sokolov and to prevent the development of a devastating nuclear weapon. But however, the mission quickly turns sour as Sokolov is recaptured, and it also becomes personal when Snake discovers that his mentor and his mother figure, the boss, has not only defected to the Soviet Union, but has also aligned herself with a rogue Soviet colonel named Volgin, who also subsequently launches a nuclear strike on Soviet soil and frames the boss, but not before the boss brutally leaves Snake injured and emotionally shaken. And essentially, with the rising tensions between the Soviet Union blaming the United States for the nuclear detonation, the threat of all-out war looms throughout the entire game. And essentially, to avert a global catastrophe, the U.S. tasks Snake with a new mission, Operation Snake Eater, in which his new objective is to eliminate the boss, dismantle Volgin's forces, and destroy their experimental nuclear weapon, the Shagohod. Now, with the help of a mysterious KGB agent named Eva, Snake faces off against the boss's Cobra elite unit and a cunning young GRU officer known as Revolver Ocelot. And as the mission pushes him further in his physical and emotional limits, Snake really must confront a painful choice between his devotion to his country and the loyalty to the woman who trained him. And that's essentially where Snake Eater kicks off.
Thank you for that summary, by the way. Get a little hungry. Listen to you talk about the game, actually. Now, but yeah, it's one. You know what? I'm just going to make a quick comment here about the story of the game. Kojima is one of those game creators who listens. I don't think he might take things personally within his own building, as we saw in the making of Metal Gear Solid 4 from his own people. He might take things personally in that way. But when it comes to the gamers, he listens. He listens to criticism. He listens to things we love, things we didn't love, things that work, things that don't work. He's never really, he might be a stubborn man in terms of getting his way with his gamers. But when it comes to feedback from the previous game, he will be receptive to it. In this case, even though Metal Gear Solid games are known for their complexity, I believe he even admitted on the making of Metal Gear Solid 4 that the story for Metal Gear Solid 2 was way too complex. And it really kind of rubbed people the wrong way.
And it also had sort of too much of a wink aspect to it, even though we both really loved it and we both really tuned into the frequency of that, so to say. That was one of those things where people just wanted Metal Gear Solid 1, but prettier and more abilities. Whereas what we got was a delve into what makes us human and what makes us who we are, and is our genetic disposition really controlling us? Or is it the nurture versus nature aspect that we got with Raiden and his upbringing with Solidus? And I don't think gamers were really prepared for that type of game at that time. But with Snake Eater, it sort of felt like this was not only Hideo Kojima's sort of reaction and not necessarily apology, but sort of his all right, you wanted Snake, we're going to give you Snake all the way through, but with a little flavor in it.
And not only that, though, but the story itself is much more streamlined.
It's much more streamlined, but even still pretty complex than that. I mean, like, there's so many little layers in there, but it's still very more straightforward game, though, for sure.
No, it's not so, I don't want to use the word convoluted, but at times Metal Gear Solid 2's plot did feel convoluted, and like you said, it was incredibly meta. Almost to a fault. Whereas with Metal Gear Solid 3, yes, there is complexion there. There's a lot going on. But it's also very easy to follow. It doesn't take you off too many different alleys that lead to, roundabouts and false endings and all this stuff. Like, it's very much, hey, I'm going to compact this. Yes, I'm going to have a lot of depth, but I'm also going to make it as easy to follow for you, so that way you're engaged in the plot. And you're not left there kind of scratching your head thinking, like, what the hell did I just watch? I have to play this again to kind of understand, like, what really happened. And I think that's why a lot of people look at Metal Gear Solid 3 as the definitive Metal Gear Solid game. Because for a lot of people, it takes every element of Metal Gear Solid: gameplay, graphics, boss fights, story, innovation. Takes it and I don't want to say it perfected it, but for many people, it got to the highest point that it could be, especially with the PlayStation 2 at the time. Yes. Absolutely, let's go ahead and segue into that in terms of the game itself. Let's talk about playability. Let's talk about because the gameplay itself is unbelievable, with the stealth, with the camouflage, with the sustenance, with everything about this game. When the gameplay is, to quote one of our friends, immaculate. What was the biggest improvement or addition for you that really stands out about the game?
I mean, probably for me, it was sort of the use of the environment and how you interacted with it. Whereas, the theme and the element of hiding in plain sight when it came to the environment was an interesting concept in that. Whereas, like, let's say you can use a beehive and shoot it at a nearby enemy and then have the beehive basically just spurt out and then the enemy just go crazy and just run away, and you just sort of make your way in that. But also you can use certain elements in certain animals as well too, like let's say a tranquilized snake. You could toss a tranquilized snake right at an enemy and he'll freak out and he'll run away as well. But probably one of the biggest things is the fact that with the game being with the setting being as analog as it was back in the 1964, it gives you less options in terms of what you can use for the stealth, but it forces your creativity in terms of when it comes to the camo and when it comes to the face paint aspect of it. And that I sort of count as the environmental aspect of the game with the stealth. Whereas how Hideo Kojima really kind of outdid himself with the stealth element was you had to be smart about your placement of your body and the placement of Snake and where he's at. And then you also had to adjust your camouflage, and you also had to adjust depending on your look and depending on your movement as well, and depending on what your stance is, you had to adjust your camouflage so that you blended into your environment as much as you possibly could. And anybody that could really go into this mode and go into the camouflage aspect, you could be masterful and you could almost be near invisible to a certain extent. But with all of that possibility, the game was actually a little less forgiving in terms of the element of the soldiers are not the genome soldiers, so they are just regular everyday soldiers, so their line of sight is more perfect than the genome. And then also on top of that, they could see you from far away. As any one of us played this game, you're just like, holy crap. I mean, we don't have the Soliton radar anymore, but they can see us from so far away now that it actually feels more realistic, and it feels more tension heightened than the other previous two games did. And not only to add on top of that, sometimes the enemies can't see you, but then there's also elements where you can't see the enemies because they're also camouflaged as well. So it was a very nice balance of just like, how do I deal with this going forward? And how do I deal with the stealth element of this? And it was truly, really just an eye-opening experience way back when in the day. But the camo was probably one of the most satisfying elements, especially when you're sitting down on the ground and an enemy just walks right past you and he doesn't see you, and then you come up behind him and you see him. It's so satisfying.
You know, you talking about the replayability of the game. The genius to Kojima, yes, is his stories with the games. They're incredibly, like we talked about, you know, a lot of depth, a lot of complexity. You can play the game over and over again and learn something new about the story, character motivations. But the reality about his games is that you could play the game 7, 8, 9, 10 times and never have the same playthrough twice. You'll always have a different experience playing it because there's so many different options of how you can go about doing the simplest task. Whether that's tranking someone, CQCing someone, shooting them, what you eat, how you cure yourself, what camo do you get, what face paint. There's so many different ways to play this game. And that's why his games are so, that's why these games are so endlessly replayable. And we're still talking about them, you know, over 2 decades later. You know, actually, I want to talk about that eating and the cure, since you're eating, and I'm that better. But I want to talk about that for a moment because that is an aspect that was introduced that has stayed with games up as recent as Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. To keep your stamina up, you have to eat stuff. I mean, whether it's fruits or, you know, whatever it may be, you have to eat stuff. And you have to keep your health up, obviously. That was you know, he had rations, or however you want to say it. But the fact that you had, you know, different fruits that you could eat, the snakes, the animals, the different things you could eat, the calorie mates. And the fact that they all didn't necessarily, they would up your stamina a certain way, or if they had gone bad, they would give you food poisoning and then you had to fix that. Who thinks of something like this? You know, like, it's incredible. Like, the fact that if the longer you play the game, some food could go rotten and could affect your health to the point where you got to heal Snake because he's got food poisoning. The level of detail and realism that he brought into it is astounding. Keep in mind, guys, this game came out in November of 2004. As we're recording this is May 9, 2025. We are damn close to it being 21 years old, almost legally allowed to drink. That is amazing. I mean, when I played it, I was 15, and here I am, freaking 35. It's depressing. But
we're only getting better, not older.
Yeah, keep telling myself that. But anyway, so it's amazing. I mean, the innovations that he had, that he incorporated into gameplay, where it wasn't just going to be a simple matter of healing yourself. You were going to have to fix bones and set bones. I mean, which we have to do right at the very beginning of the game when you get thrown off the bridge, and you have to. You know, you're broke your shoulder. You have to separate. You have to pop it back into place. You have to put the thing in your mouth and pop and put the sash around it, the sling, the splints. Everything. I mean, he left no stone unturned. And I'm going to go ahead and say something right now because it reminded me of what Spielberg said about Stanley Kubrick's movies, which was, you can watch a Kubrick movie however many different times you want, and then however many minutes into it, you'll just give up and you'll be surprised all over again by the movie. It's almost like watching it for the first time because his technique was so sound and it's such an entrancing visual experience. Yeah, it's perfect. That's kind of how Hideo Kojima's games are.
Absolutely.
You know what's going to happen. You know the boss fights. You know the lines of dialogue. You know everything. But you will never, like I said earlier, you will never have the same experience playing that game twice, ever. Mm-hmm. Unless you intentionally play it the same way, which I don't know why you would. There's so many different ways to beat it. It always feels like a fresh game every time. It's unbelievable.
And probably one of the biggest elements in terms of one thing that I kind of missed the first time around, and I've only gotten better at it the more I played, was the CQC element. And it was brand new, and it's one of those things where if you practiced hard enough and you practiced enough with CQC, you can become surgical with it. You can become where you grab someone from behind and then you literally use them as a human shield. You can grab someone from behind and you can literally throw them right into the ground and knock them out unconscious. Or you could also just capture them and then ask them or interrogate them for information as well. So it was far different than when you did the stick up in Metal Gear Solid 2 in particular, where it's like, oh, you just stick someone up and you sneak up behind them and you gotta show them that you mean business. Whereas in this game, it was, you had various other different ways of getting information, but also even in terms of what the enemies gave you as well. It wasn't just information, it was also codec frequencies where they go, if you go into this codec frequency, you could shut off the alert system, which is so freaking satisfying to get that, especially when you had to use the element of stealth to outmaneuver an enemy and then also outmaneuver them in terms of their physical ability as well, because the melee in Metal Gear Solid is not necessarily complex, but the CQC element in Metal Gear Solid 3 certainly made it even more so than what it ever was before and what we ever thought possible with the stealth element.
I mean, it's absolutely amazing when you think about it. Let me ask you this. The Subsistence re-release with the new camera system, what did you think about it? What were your initial thoughts when that came out?
Originally, I was like, okay, it might be just a gimmick to resell the game and whatever it is. I'm kind of a sucker for these re-releases, as Substance for Metal Gear Solid 2 was a re-release, but it added the VR missions. It added so much more elements to it as well that were just fun, but not necessarily essential. The Subsistence remake with the new camera system makes the game into a far different and a far more buttery smooth experience, in my personal opinion, because with the fixed camera perspective, it is almost impossible to sort of get through certain elements in certain levels, especially with the Krasnogoye sequence in particular. I never got past that without setting off the alarm, and it was only up until Subsistence that I was like, oh, I actually stood a chance because my periphery is a lot more better, and I have more spatial awareness as well too. So the Subsistence re-release with the new camera system makes it into a completely different game entirely, and it makes it into a better one, in my opinion.
Kojima, in my opinion, has always been George Lucas. Because, yes, George Lucas has THX 1138, he has American Graffiti, but let's be real. We're all going to know George Lucas from Star Wars, and that is his legacy project. Just like Kojima has his projects outside of Metal Gear Solid, some more respected than others. Metal Gear Solid is what he's always going to be known for. He will, whenever you hear the name Hideo Kojima, no matter what he does for the rest of his life, it will always be Metal Gear Solid. And what you just said about Subsistence is kind of like what Lucas did with the OG trilogy, where he kind of futzed around with it and added CGI, cleaned it up, perfected it, whatever terms he wants to use. That's what Kojima did. Because Metal Gear Solid 2 also had Substance, as I recall.
Yes.
Then Subsistence comes out for 3. So it's not like he could just be satisfied with one iteration of the game. If there's something that was nagging at him, he wanted to fix it. He wanted to go back there, and as soon as it was you know, available to fix it. As soon as the technology was there to fix it, or the mistake was found, or whatever the case may be, or the imperfection was, eventually discovered, he went back and he fixed it, like George Lucas fixed the originals, although that's debatable. So I've always kind of felt that way about those particular iterations of the games. I'm a purist for the original games. I understand what you're saying about Subsistence. Yes, the camera system is fixed, no doubt about it. Maybe it's just nostalgia talking, but I am a purist when it comes to the original releases of the said games, specifically 2 and 3.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is not to negate the original version of Metal Gear Solid 3. It's still a fantastic game, but it's one of those things where there is a night and day difference, especially when you're playing the Master Collection on the PS5 right now. I mean, there's a certain part of me that sometimes I'm like, you know what, I switch between the two, and then I always end up going back to the Subsistence new camera system to go forward because it's so much more intuitive, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So, Andres, let's talk about, I mean, this is obviously, whenever we talk about movies or games, this is actually my favorite part. It's talking about our favorite parts of the game. With any Metal Gear Solid game, you're going to have some scenes that are just emblazoned on your memory forever. Whether that be boss fights, whether that be cinematics, whether that be funny moments that happen when you're playing the game, whatever the case may be. There are a ton of memorable moments from this game. Almost too many to count, as we discussed off camera. But just curious, what are some of your favorite moments from the game?
I mean, honestly, as a big Bond person myself, and as someone who loves Tomorrow Never Dies as well, the Halo jump is probably one of my most like, oh, when I think of Metal Gear Solid, I think about Metal Gear Solid 3 in particular. I think about that Halo jump and how cinematic it was and how it got you in the mood and how it got you just like, yeah, we're going to be going into the virtuous mission. And then perfectly punctuated by the time that he lands, he takes off the mask, and then it's Raiden's face, and it was Hideo Kojima giving a wink where it's like, yeah, I know you guys hated Raiden, but guaranteed it's not going to be Raiden, guys. But just an amazing moment to open up the game with, and open up to how cinematic it was going forward, and how much Kojima did not lose his touch when it came to a third iteration of the game. And even with both of us kind of going like, you know what, kind of disappointed that we're not seeing a further iteration of Metal Gear Solid 2, but what we're getting right here, it's not going to be any different. And in fact, maybe the expectation might be set a little higher now because Hideo did that, certainly.
Yeah, no, that was, and honestly, he did it years before Tom Cruise did it at Mission Impossible Fallout. Yeah, for me, I mean, this is the clear and obvious one that just stands out to me, because there's so many great moments from this game, but one of the most notorious scenes in gaming history is the torture scene. The torture scene in this game is so brutal and so shocking. I to this day, I'm still amazed at the visceralness of it, the brutality of it. Because in Metal Gear Solid 1, when you're standing, not standing, well, you're standing vertical when you're on the bed, but when you're getting tortured by Ocelot with the electricity going through your body, that was brutal. It was also brutal on your thumb for pressing, the button repeatedly to try to regain your strength after the electrical charges. And obviously that's, incredibly painful. And every time you do it, you have to survive. You can't give up, because if you give up, that means Meryl's going to die. There's a lot of stuff going on with that. MGS2, kind of similar thing happens with Raiden, albeit very briefly. But with this one, with Volgin just going frickin', medieval on Naked Snake, Big Boss, if you will. That will always stand out in my mind, is that scene and the brutality of it, and the fact that I was waiting for it. I had a feeling something like that might happen, and the fact that I've played, I don't know how many games I've played since then in the last 20, 21 years that have all been incredibly brutal, incredibly violent. I don't think there's ever been a scene that's been as violent or as hard-hitting as that one, unless I'm forgetting something. But that's incredible. That was an incredible scene.
No, absolutely. And even to further go on with that, it also made Volgin look that much more of a menace, because of the fact that you understood that Volgin did have Eva, and was using Eva in sort of very sadistic ways, and it only made you even more terrified for what she was going through throughout the entire game before you had even gotten there. And it was one of those things where, like, the brutality of it is sort of unparalleled, because, you know, it's one of those things where Kojima, for some reason, he decided to let this torture sequence play out in the way where you're not hitting a button every time, but you just have to sit there and you have to watch, and you have to see your health bar and your stamina keep going down further. But you can just hear all the torture, and you can just hear everything that's going on. In fact, the entire first half of the torture sequence is played in utter blackness, so you don't even see what's going on. And then when it cuts to what is going on over the bag that Snake has in his face, all of a sudden you see this room that's just doused in blood and doused in so much stuff that has happened before you have even gotten there, that it just paints so much more of a vivid and a horrific picture of what Volgin and his crew do. And it's utterly terrifying, and it's utterly uncomfortable. And then even though you know that maybe this is the Snake that we know later on down the line, or is this another person, but even still, you sort of felt the dread and the threat that this guy could very well die at any point. And it made you forget that this is a prequel for a little bit.
And it also has a pivotal moment for the history of Metal Gear Solid and for the character when he loses his eye. Because as we know, Big Boss from Metal Gear Solid lore has the eye patch over his eye. And for most of the game, he's got both eyes. So you know he's going to lose his eye at some point. The only question is, how is he going to lose that eye? And they
planted so many false starts for how they were going to do that. The second that the boss has the knife and slowly puts it towards his eyeball, and Volgin's just sitting there going, "Yeah, you want to prove that you're not working with him? Give me his eyes." I hate those eyes. I was like, "Geez, is this the way we lose him?" And then it deflates, and then all of a sudden, it actually turns out Revolver Ocelot is the reason why Big Boss loses his eye, and it's so much more of a gratifying moment as opposed to having Snake lose his eye by just a moment of circumstance. He actually loses his eye trying to save Eva from the bullet, and that makes it even more so badass that that's how he lost the eyeball. You know what I mean?
No, 100%. It's still my all-time favorite moment from the game, just because I haven't forgotten about how shocking it was, how hard-hitting it was, and that it's essential to the Metal Gear Solid lore. It's a moment that we were all waiting for, and it's something that didn't disappoint. And like you said, the way in which he does lose it it's fantastic.
And then also it goes even further to show that because Ocelot is right there, witnessing the torture sequence and watching Volgin use the electrical powers and stuff like that, that is one of those things where I think that seeded in Ocelot what his torture method would be going forward as a much more mature and as a much more older soldier, that he's like, you know what? Volgin used the electricity. That's what I'm going to model myself after. So again, it plants seeds that pay off in further installments.
Yeah, no, for sure. And just while I'm on it too, I mean, I was going to mention when the nuclear bomb goes off in the prologue of the game, which is a great moment because it's kind of like a holy shit kind of moment. But I want to talk about something it has echoes of how I felt personally during Metal Gear Solid 4 when we went back to Shadow Moses. For me personally, this moment I should say, remind me, what is the name of the Russian engineer scientist, not Sokolov, the other one that you meet, the guy who Volgin ends up killing, he puts into the bin and starts beating the shit out of it. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. He goes and talks to him in the office. He starts talking to him about Sokolov and other things, the Shagohod, blah, 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 blah. And then you see the plans for what he was developing and that, his project that got shut down. And it's Metal Gear Rex.
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool when I first saw that. When I first played through that game, I thought that was so damn cool. I still think it's cool because I didn't expect it. For some reason, I didn't expect to tie into Metal Gear Solid 1 so far back in the 60s because Metal Gear Solid 1 takes place in 2005. So I didn't expect a reference to MGS1 or Metal Gear Solid Rex in that way, I should say, 41 years prior. So that caught me off guard. But I thought it was such a great, awesome moment, and that's another one of my favorite moments from the game that I'll, every time I either play the game or rewatch it, it still makes me smile.
Oh yeah, and also just even going on that aspect as well too, like Kojima really went all out with the camouflage, even so much so to the point that in order to get to that character in the office, you had to disguise yourself as a scientist.
Right.
And we had never gotten that in the games previous, where you disguise yourself as another person, which also goes into one of my favorite moments of the game, where you have to, as Naked Snake, you have to disguise yourself as Ivan Reinikoff, who is Volgan's right-hand man, who also bears a very distinct similarity to Raiden in the future, that all of a sudden it just turns into, oh, you have to not only find this character and incapacitate him, but you also have to take his uniform, and you also have to assume his identity, and also you have to just make your way to this complex and make your way back to Sokolov, but impersonating an officer again, which was even further of an evolution than what Raiden did in Metal Gear Solid 2, where he dressed up as an enemy soldier. You had to assume an identity, and I love the fact that everyone bought into the disguise. And then the second that Volgan sees you, he doesn't even look at you for not even like 1 minute, and then he's like, "What did you do with Ivan?" And I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like, he knows his comrade. Well, comrade in the bedroom as well too is so implicated. But yeah, I just found that to be a great way to sort of add the humor aspect, but also in terms of the gameplay, further expand upon it with all the disguises that are in the game. And this is also just something that when you go back into plant the bombs on the Shagohod, you can also disguise yourself as a maintenance person and have that be so much easier than how I did it originally, and it's something that could be easily missed. And it's an element of the gameplay that Hideo Kojima didn't really need to elaborate on too much, but it's one of those that, God, I'm so thankful that he went down that road, and it made it less monotonous than the other games. Not necessarily saying that the other ones were, but when it comes to gameplay, there's a certain level of, repetition that comes in with any game. Whereas I felt that the disguise element also added something to, hey, there's another way you can hide in plain sight.
Well, it just goes back to what I was saying, where you can play the game in so many different ways. You can beat it in so many different ways. There's so many different camos you can use, so many disguises you can use. I mean, Mission Impossible-esque, with the rippable face mask. It's a deliberate homage as well, by the way, probably to the TV show, not the Tom Cruise movies, but the TV show of the '60s. So I mean, just another homage that we didn't talk about. But no, you're absolutely right. And you know what? I'm kind of selfish. I mean, there's so many different moments we've talked about with this game, but I really want to get to it because it is an aspect that we should discuss, and that is the boss fights. In a Metal Gear Solid game made by Kojima, I was always so excited for the boss fights because he always knew. Yes, you had action elements to it. You had interactivity with the environment in order to beat somebody, but he also found a way to add just the right amount of horror into some of his boss fights. Whether that be Psycho Mantis, Vulcan Raven, Sniper Wolf, Vamp, and then we come to Metal Gear Solid 3, and you have something like the Sorrow, for example, which is, I don't want to say the Metal Gear Solid is super grounded in reality. It's grounded in some sort of reality, I suppose, a hyper reality, if you will. Mm-hmm. But it is a supernatural element to this series, no doubt about it. And the Sorrow is one of those more extreme examples of supernatural in the Metal Gear Solid universe. But for me personally, I mean, I want to talk about the boss first. I mean, let's talk about the greatness of the boss fight. Arguably, probably my favorite boss fight of all time. Probably.
It's right up there in terms of where the stakes are emotionally for Snake and how much you've worked up to delving into the boss and going up against her and knowing that she dismantled you so easily without breaking a sweat. Not only once, but at the start of the Snake Eater mission as well too. She just takes your gun and she breaks it and she goes, "Go back home, Jack." And it's oh my God. It's like you're working your way up to this person, and even Colonel Volgan, after dealing with him, you sort of feel a little like, shit, you're gonna be out of your element with the boss.
Yep.
But just in terms of the execution, and in terms of the look, and in terms of just the setting, the beautiful setting with the flower field, and with just how that looks so serene, but it's utterly terrifying as well too. And then just also just the element of that the boss you have to know your CQC by that point. Otherwise, it's going to be a really hard battle. But I love the fact that if the boss even reaches you, instead of dismantling your weapons, she'll actually take your weapons and throw them very far away while shooting at you with that machine gun. And it just adds a level of complexity to the fact that you cannot let a boss touch you. Otherwise, you might as well be dead. And then just also even the element of that you can also use the environment to your advantage as well too. With the camo, you can also hide yourself from the boss, but you better be damn careful in terms of not letting anything give you away, whether it be just the way you move and the flower petals just go up in the air and then she goes, oh, there you are. Or just even just having, just like making a sound while you're trying to get a steak so you can up your stamina. There's so many levels of complexity with the boss fight, that it absolutely, it's just one of those really, really great boss fights. And just also the adage that once her health actually gets more than halfway, she puts a time limit on the boss fight itself, and she goes, kill me in 5 minutes, we have to get this done. And then the Snake Eater theme starts up, and you just get so much more excited for the end of that match. And it's just one of those, it's a cacophony of amazingness for a boss fight.
You know, and I'll go ahead and say this. It's one of the only boss fights, if not the only boss fight, that could be considered art. Mm-hmm. In terms of everything. In terms of the gameplay. In terms of the level design. The lighting. The stakes. The emotion. It's art. I think, I don't care what anybody says. Video games are art. They are an art form. I don't know what Roger Ebert said a lot of like dumb things in his life. I mean, no disrespect. I mean, he was one of my favorite, movie critics of all time. But he was wrong a lot. And one of the things he was definitely wrong on was saying that video games aren't art. They are 100% art. They are incredibly hard to make. And in this case, I feel like when a boss fight comes along like this, or an aspect of a game comes along like this that is so rare to reach that upper echelon of what a game can be, I think Kojima really, he outdid himself with that one, and he made it count in ways that no other boss fight in his entire body of work has come close to replicating. And there's been tons of great ones, man. There's been tons. I mean, we could talk about his boss fights. We could make a video just strictly about Metal Gear Solid boss fights and how many great ones. They are so different with the stakes and with gameplay and with everything. Environments, everything's different. But there's something truly special about this. And I'm sorry, but if you watch someone play it on YouTube, you're not gonna get the effect of it. You have to play this thing from the start to the finish. And moreover, you have to play the first two games. I know there's games before, but like, let's just keep it to Metal Gear Solid 2. You have to play the first two games too, to get to that moment, to get to where, every gamer was in 2004 when we played it. It's just overwhelming. And there's a reason why we're still talking about it today. We can't talk about it enough in terms of what an achievement that was, where all the powers of Hideo Kojima and his crew came together to create an unforgettable moment in gaming history with this boss fight. Maybe we're hyping up too much.
Yeah, I think we're not hyping it up enough, and especially with the element of that Hideo Kojima throughout the entire Metal Gear series has this theme of the cycle of pain and the cycle of war. And when you finally take out the boss at the very end, there is an element of a somberness to it. There is an element that she is going, you have freed me, please pull that trigger and let me be reunited with my love, the sorrow, and please deliver me from this. And again, like how sort of the Sniper Wolf boss fight back in 1 did,
Yeah, I'm glad you said
there was an element of just sadness to it, and you weren't going like, yeah, the mission's complete. You were just like, crap. The moment really let you linger, especially with the fact that you had to pull the final trigger on her head and you had to finish her off, and it was a moment that was elongated. And it was truly, again, it was an art piece. It was masterful.
No, it's incredible. And I'm glad you brought up the Sniper Wolf ending 2 piece. That's what I was thinking. Aside from the fact that they're both blondes that were trying to kill you, there is no sense of triumph at the end of the boss fight. It's just kind of a depression, frankly. I mean, like no other word to say. It's kind of like I can't believe that just happened, and dealing with the emotion of it. Now, in terms of we talk about this revolutionary gameplay, innovative gameplay. I told you at the start of the video we were going to talk about those words and bring up those words a lot, but let's talk about the end for a little bit. The boss fight at the end, because that is equally game, for lack of a better phrase, game changing. And for those of you who don't know and who are still watching this, I don't know why you would watch this if you've never played the game before, but the end being the sniper of the group that you're going up against, who's how old is he? Like 100 years old, something like 90.
At least.
Super old. He's in a wheelchair the whole time.
He is knocking on death's door, and he's literally not moving because he wants to save up his energy for that last really great sniper battle.
And he's got that, like, the eyes that kind of come out of his skull a little bit, and the parrot too is some sort of bird. I think it's a parrot.
Yeah, it's a parakeet.
Parakeet. Anyway, when you talk about different ways of playing the game, talk about different ways of beating it. There's no one way to beat this guy. The other boss fights, it's pretty much just one way. Like, you got to, whether it's the fear, the pain, whatever the case may be, like, there's only one way to do it. Like, you got to take him out. You got to survive, take him out, and that's it. In this case, Andres, it's different. Why don't you talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so let's just go with the main version for now. The main way you take on the end is it is flat out just a sniper battle in a wide open area, and it's one of those where it truly feels like it is sort of connecting even more further with something like Enemy at the Gates, where you are faced in this giant environment where he can be anywhere, and you have to be very careful about what you leave behind and what footprints you're leaving behind as well, because not only are you being tracked, but you're also tracking the hunted as well. And it's also another thing too, where they clearly show that he has a stamina bar and he's going to have to eat at some point as well, just in the same way that you are. So there are various ways that you can set up, like poisoned food, or you can set up like fruits that are clearly bad for you, and you can just leave him out, and then the second that he comes over to pick him up, you can pick him off. But also on top of that, he is 10 steps ahead of you in terms of the camouflage, and he blends into the environment. And there's truly moments where it is so serene and beautiful, and then you're looking around and you're with your binoculars, and then you catch the little glint of the scope, and you're just like, oh shit, he's right there. He hasn't noticed me yet. I gotta sneak my way around him, and I've got to find a good point where I can see him. But you have to be very careful that you don't make your presence known, because if you can see him, there is a finite chance that he might be able to spot you as well, and then you're back to it all over again. Now, this is one of those boss fights where it can take hours or it can take minutes, depending on how you go about it. But it's one of those things where it just feels like a very meditative experience, if that makes any sense. But you have to also give the time for it as well.
It's a cerebral boss fight. It's an intellectual boss fight.
Absolutely.
And, we talked about in the beginning how Kojima continually, upped the ante with each game that he put out. So he would fix things, or he would adjust things, improve things, whatever the case may be. Now, in Metal Gear Solid 1 with Sniper Wolf, you have 2 iterations of it. You have the one underneath where the satellite dish is.
Communication tower.
The communication tower, and that long walkway where Meryl gets shot. Okay, so that's the first iteration where you're just shooting down the corridor at her. And then the second one is when you're out in the snowy field with the trees and the hills, and it's like slopey and whatnot. There's a blizzard going on. It's incredible. Personally, forget about Twin Snakes. I mean, like, I just a PS5 remaster of that fight specifically would be delicious. But he took that concept. It was like, okay, it was confined. You could only really stay in this one area. You couldn't really move around and kind of, flush her out and, ambush her and flank her. You couldn't really do that. So with this, with the PS2 and what it could do, and again, pushing the limits of what it could achieve, you could go pretty much anywhere you wanted and track him down. You could sneak up on him and shoot at him.
Yeah.
Distance. Hell, you could not play him at all and just wait, and he will die.
that was the other thing that I loved as well too, that Hideo Kojima, I mean, God, he has such a great sense of humor. Whereas if you load the game up after maybe a week or so, if you haven't gotten past this boss fight, the end could literally die of old age, and then you're done.
And then you're done.
And then you're done, and it goes off even further. But what I also love is that he also added another element to it where there are 3 different ways you can kill the end. Number 1, the regular boss fight. Number 2, you could literally have him die of old age. But probably my favorite one, and the one that I can't help but do every single time when I do a second playthrough, and when I'm feeling more like in a speedrunner mode more than anything else, is the first scene that the end is introduced in. If you found the sniper rifle, and this is a big if you found the sniper rifle before the end's first introduction, you can actually kill the end right off the bat. Like, maybe 2 hours before you even get to his boss fight, you can just literally scope him out, and then you can kill him, and the boss fight doesn't even happen, and you just skip it.
No,
it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, okay, Hideo knows that, listen, if you're just trying to get through this your second round, here's an opportunity for you to just kill them all really fast. And I just love how demented and how just just how hilarious that is. And that he gave us that opportunity. He gave us the opportunity to have this really beautiful, serene, meditative boss fight, but he also gave you probably one of the most hilarious ways that you can get rid of him as well. Because the second you snipe the end, after that cutscene has gone on and you clearly see him just sitting there not doing anything, the second that you snipe him, he blows up, and then his wheelchair, the wheel, falls on top of Snake as if going like, yeah, you're going to get a little damage for doing this, but you know what? This is a nice little wink to you.
No, it's incredible. I mean, it's again a testament to how he views games and the different ways that you can go about it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I totally forgot that you could snipe. If you have it, you can totally take him right there and not even have the boss fight. It's just incredible. But if you do go about playing the boss fight, it is one of the best boss fights you'll ever have, just because of the different ways you can go about doing it.
It's really great, and it's also really worth playing even to today. So yeah,
no, absolutely. It's one of the aspects of the remake I'm actually looking forward to. Just one side note I want to note real quick. For whatever reason, I've always kind of liked it. I don't know if it's because of the nightmarish tone of it, the nightmarish imagery of it. Not the sorrow. I'm talking about the fury. And I don't know why, because there's no backstory to this guy, really. There's no real... I don't even know if there's a real function that he serves other than to just be a boss fight. But the voice of him, he actually sounds like a demon. And, I think I forgot the story and how it relates to, like, what was it, like an astronaut that went crazy or something like that, and like being out there and with the fire, with the blazes of fire that he has as he kind of goes around trying to find you. I mean, there's something very hellish about that boss fight that kind of caught me off guard that I wasn't really expecting. Because there's always, like I said, there's kind of an element of horror to a lot of his boss fights. That one specifically stands out to me. Yes, the sorrow as well. That's just pure horror. But with the fury too, there was some, like, just a level of sadism in that boss fight that was kind of incredible. and again, terrifying because of the actor's voice. It's real. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even going along with that as well, this is a character that is birthed in fire and birthed as a demon. And that entire thing really does lend itself to his character and also to the theme that he's playing. He's not the demolition expert, but he's sort of the okay, we need to mow down. He's sort of crowd control, if that makes sense. But it's kind of horrific how he does it. So there you go. But now that you bring, so that is a really great boss fight. But now that you bring up the sorrow, I did want to touch on the sorrow a little bit in terms of just what his boss fight actually does implicate for the gamer in general. Whereas the sorrow, you have to walk through this river towards the sorrow as he's sort of just taunting you and floating around and making you experience all these hellish images. But the other thing that he really does as well, in terms of Hideo Kojima's stance against violence and the stance against brutal violence, not brutal, but unnecessary violence, and encouraging the stealth element, is every single character that you've killed or that you've ended the life of comes back to haunt you and comes back to really make you pay for just the fact that you decided to murder this person and not sneak past him. And that boss fight can get really long, and it can also get really eye-opening in terms of like, oh my god, I didn't realize I killed these many people as I was walking towards. And the thing is that it's one of those things where it almost turns into avoiding people as you're going along. And then the thing is, if you touch any one of these ghosts, your health bar goes down, and it is very hard to avoid some of these people as you're walking through, because of the fact if you've killed more people, it becomes an even harder boss fight. But if you've done your Peace Walker, your peaceful playthrough, it becomes a lot easier, and the game rewards you for using the stealth, but it punishes you for murdering people. And I thought that was a really interesting thing that Kojima was trying to say with a game like this. So I think that was an incredible boss fight as well.
I think that's pretty much the only time in a game. Well, let me make it more specific. In a Metal Gear Solid game, where Kojima really, like you said, really makes you think about the consequences of your actions. Because I was trying to think about it. I was like, is there any other moments like that where, there's like that GoldenEye moment when 006 tells James Bond, have you found forgiveness in the arms of all those willing women for all the dead ones you failed to protect? And he kind of has that moment where he's thinking about it, and then you realize, oh my God, James Bond really did have a moments where he let a lot of women down. Same thing with Solid Snake. It's like, God, I never really thought about it, but like, since you call it, like you aptly said, like, it's like Rambo First Blood Part 2, and Stallone in that movie kills so many damn people.
It becomes comical.
Yeah, but in this one with Big Boss, it's like, my God, I mean, like, and forget, what about the people that he's killed in previous missions?
Yeah.
So that is a very powerful moment, no doubt about it. And thank you for bringing that up and kind of, going outside of the supernatural aspect of it, but just, seeing all the soldiers that you've killed and everybody that you've killed. It is incredibly haunting to make you think about the violence and the carnage that you've created. I mean, just again, it's Kojima's genius. That word gets thrown all around a lot lately, but I mean, he really is. I mean, he's a genius. What can you say about it? So, Andres, let's talk about the ending. I mean, we've talked about the final boss fight with the boss, but let's talk about the ending and what it all means in terms of the grander scheme of things in the Metal Gear Solid universe. What did you think when you first played it, and what did you think about the magnitude of it?
Well, going from the boss fight, that's a handful right there. But going from the boss's fight to ultimately the end, where it's the typical Bond thing where all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, you're enjoying the drink with Eva, and oh, you know what, you get a night with Eva and all that other stuff, and you're also going to be promoted the next day and you're going to be celebrated. But then Eva drops a bombshell on you the very next day after Naked Snake wakes up, and she reveals that not only was she not working for the KGB, but she was also working for the Chinese Liberation Front as an operative posing as a KGB member. So their entire relationship is kind of built on a lie to begin with. And with that, she walked out with the legacy as well. And there's the sense of betrayal on that front. But then she drops the big bombshell, which is that the boss had never truly defected and that the boss's mission was a cover-up by the United States to recover the legacy, and that her death was actually a part of a grander plan to maintain the US's political image and to avoid war. And in essence, the boss was a true patriot who gave up not only her honor, her life, and her legacy for her country, knowing that she would be remembered in the history books as a traitor to the US and as a monster to the Soviets. And all that comes on the heels of Naked Snake earning the title of Big Boss. And again, as we talked about, where it's typical games, you're faced with a triumph of a boss battle. And then when you get to this, you feel not only betrayed, but you also feel manipulated by the system itself. And that you also do feel that the boss's death was utterly meaningless, and she gave her life for a very tragic purpose, and a purpose that not only recontextualizes the entire game, but it gets you to empathize with Big Boss and know exactly what his motivation was the second that he found that out and why his turn to the dark side happened. And it is one of those moments where I truly, truly understood a villain and his motivation to sort of fix everything from the inside and become that chaotic force of nature later on. And that is one of those things where I have not experienced that in a game where you got to empathize and you sympathized with a big antagonist later on, and you understood exactly what he did, and you're not only does it make you more complicit in knowing why he did what he did, but in terms of knowing what you would do in that situation, it's one of those things where you're just like, yeah, I buy his motivation. In fact, if I wasn't playing as Solid Snake, he would be the protagonist in that situation.
Yeah.
And just the utter reveal of that and knowing what it meant to Naked Snake in terms of being disillusioned by the government and the manipulation that happened and being forever changed in this truth of what loyalty and sacrifice really mean for your character. It's one of those things where we were not prepared for the emotional gut punch that Hideo Kojima was going to give us with this ending. In fact, we were pretty much just kind of going like, oh, this is fun. And then by the very end of it, you're like, Kojima actually stepped up his storytelling abilities to a next level. And in my opinion, this is probably the cleanest and the most concise and also the most emotionally affecting from all the Metal Gear Solid games up to that point. And you just knew you were in the hands of a master storyteller when you got to this ending.
It is a great ending. And actually it has, and aspects of it, they have echoes of Casino Royale. But it is a great ending because it brings everything into sharper focus. Mm-hmm. And it kind of, I don't want to say ties a bow over everything because you still have Metal Gear Solid 4 to tie up everything for you, but it certainly ties up a bow to the past, if that makes sense. And it answers a lot of loose ends and fills in a lot of blanks that we were wondering about from the first two games and games before that. Which brings me to the remake that is coming out. And I want to tell you that we actually did a video for Resident Evil 4 back in, I believe it was 2020, 2021, something like that.
Yeah, 2021, I believe.
January 20. It was very early 2021, and the remake was still just over 2 years away. And I remember we were talking about how do you remake perfection, because that's how not only us, like many people look at the original Resident Evil 4 as perfection. Mm-hmm. And somehow Capcom made a game that
They did it.
Maybe better than the original. I mean, it's unbelievable, and not just Resident Evil 4, but Resident Evil 2 as well. Final Fantasy VII Remake, the sequel to Remake, Silent Hill 2. There's just been so many great remakes that have come out that have not only done justice to the original game, but have kind of created their own vibe and their own aura. And they've taken I'm sorry. I mean, like that, it's kind of what Twin Snakes should have done and could have done. But I was skeptical of the remake of MGS3. I was skeptical of it. Still am, kind of, but not nearly as much as I used to be. Because it seems like every remake that comes out, thank God, knock wood, they've been able to maintain the integrity of the original game and pioneer a new direction for it and make it fix everything that was wrong with it, kind of like Subsistence with the cameras like we talked about. But you're getting the brand new graphics. I can only imagine what that jungle is going to look like. I can only imagine what the creature is going to look like, what the camo is going to look like, what the boss fights are going to play like. I can only imagine what this is all going to be. And the reason why that is because of the remakes that have come out in the past. Silent Hill 2 being the most recent one, where it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh. I mean, the remake of Silent Hill 2 just absolutely, it's quite possibly the scariest game I've ever played. The Final Fantasy VII remake, which was in development for God knows how many years, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, there's reason to be optimistic about that. What are you looking forward to the most in this remake?
Honestly, for the idea of remaking perfection, this game, while it was fantastic, and I think it was perfection for the time, we have grown into a much more sophisticated method with certain elements. And I think that there could be opportunities for quality of life improvements. I will say the one thing in the MGS3 that was clarified in 4 that I'm hoping might be clarified in this remake is not necessarily the breaking of the pacing in terms of using the camo, because every time you had to switch up your camo, you had to go into a pause screen. Right. And from what I've seen so far, they are at least clarifying that you can actually switch the camo in the middle of gameplay. And that to me lends a much more exciting era of, oh, this is going to be even more seamless than it was before. And also to the idea that, like, you know, with the codec calls, there is now a quick codec function that I saw floating around out there that you can actually call people within the gameplay itself, and you can actually do like a quick phone call. And while small little tweaks and small little quality of life things I would love to see incorporated in terms of using the camera, using the aiming camera from Metal Gear Solid 4 in this, I think there is plenty of ways that it can be not necessarily perfected, but it could be improved. But the other thing too is I don't want them to improve so much that it doesn't become what Snake Eater is. In the same way that when they tried to improve the gameplay mechanics of Twin Snakes by adding the hanging mode and adding the first person perspective to that first game that wasn't built for it, that is sort of the thing I am very weary about with the remake. But there's a lot of potential and there's a lot of opportunity, especially with the engine and how it looks and how certain things and how the environment looks gorgeous. That is what I'm most excited about more than anything else. But also, I have to say I'm also excited for the fact that we have David Hayter coming back to voice Snake. And I'm sorry, but Kiefer Sutherland, terrific actor, but it just felt different. It just felt different when he was voicing Snake, and now that we got Hayter back, it feels like we're coming home, for lack of a better word, more than anything else, despite the fact that Kojima is not on board for this one.
Which is a bummer. And again, that's actually kind of a reason why I am a little skeptical of it. But having Hayter back is kind of a big deal. And by kind of a big deal, it is a big deal. David Hayter coming back is a big plus. And again, it brings legitimacy to the game. It makes it feel, more official than if they had gotten, Kiefer Sutherland to come back, or even just another actor to do a David Hayter impression. So that I am fired up about. But I am a little nervous about Kojima not being involved, and I knew there was no way he was going to be involved.
No.
But I still think there's enough there to be legitimately excited. I think every day that goes by, every week that goes by, every month that goes by, once we get closer, once more stuff starts coming out, once more footage starts coming out, I'll start getting more and more and more excited. But it is going to be, I think it will be great. I hope it will be great. It's all that. It's kind of like what Cubby Broccoli, right before he died, when Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson took over the Bond franchise. What Cubby Broccoli told them was, don't ever stray too far away from the material. It's all there in Ian Fleming's books. The spirit of James Bond is in there. What to do is in there. Everything you need is in those books. You don't ever have to stray too far away. And I hope the developers kind of keep that mentality with Metal Gear Solid 3. It's all there in the original game. It's all there in Subsistence, all there in Snake Eater. You don't have to do too much else. Just update the graphics as you will. You can make a couple tweaks here and there, make it more modern, but don't make it too modern. Make it nostalgic and make it honorable, but still kind of, make it new and contemporary. But it's all there. Don't divert too far away from it. Keep what works, which is damn near everything.
It's a very narrow bullseye on their front, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can hit that bullseye.
Yeah, yes, but it's all there. It's all there in those games. You don't need to go too far away from it.
Absolutely.
So that's the way I feel about it. It's going to be. I'm very interested to see how this review kind of holds up and how we kind of go back and look at it and how we're talking about the remake now previously playing for. Because going back and watching the Resident Evil 4 video we did, it's funny to go back and watch it. And we had no idea what to expect. And I think I said something like, you can't top perfection. I think I said that. I think you can't top perfection.
Yeah.
So why even try with Resident Evil 4? Well, they did it. Capcom did it.
They did it, and I don't know. I think it's going to be something that we should review later on down the line. Maybe we do a Delta review by the end.
I'm more than that. If you even want to do a compare and contrast, if you want to take like footage if you want to talk about scenes from the game or gameplay from the game and kind of have a comparison, and I'm more than down to talk about that when the time comes.
We should do that.
But in the meantime, do you have anything else you'd like to cover?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything about the game. I mean, just my overall thoughts on the game is. It is a masterwork in terms of storytelling and in terms of giving us a story that we weren't prepared for and that we, as an audience, didn't really want, for lack of a better word. And then when it came out, we were all just surprised by how good that story was and how much we were just not prepared for it, and how much we weren't prepared for how this would affect future titles and the impact of our enjoyment would come from this game. And it is just a masterfully crafted game that also is very masterfully crafted in terms of its story and in terms of getting us to really sympathize with the antagonist that would pop up later on in the game and make you be on his side, so that if you ever went back and you played Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, you knew what he was doing. And in fact, it makes it that much more tragic when he's confronted by his own son later on down the line. And it's one of those that it really adds so much to the universe that I don't think another prequel is even done. I mean, I don't even think Lucas did it in the same way either with Revenge of the Sith or any of that other stuff, because I think I think he tried to do it the prequel series, but I don't think it worked nearly as well as Hideo Kojima did in this particular franchise. It was smart to go back in time for 3 and then to come back to present day for 4. And knowing that you got introduced to certain characters in 3 and seeing them pop up later on down the line, we're not going to go into it right now. We'll definitely go into it in a Metal Gear Solid 4 review at some point. But yeah, this is absolutely a mastercraft in so many ways, and I have no problem saying that Metal Gear Solid 3, for everything they had tried to do in video games for that point in time, this is a work of art.
It is a work of art. And I actually was going to call it the Revenge of the Sith of the Metal Gear Solid franchise. Mm-hmm. Like you say, you do see a hero kind of turn and what makes him turn. It would have been interesting to see Revenge of the Sith somehow come in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But honestly, that's kind of what Kojima did. Because of the cliffhanger of Metal Gear Solid 2, there's a cliffhanger of Empire Strikes Back, big one. Mm-hmm. But Kojima said, no, I'm going to give you a different story first. And that way, when Metal Gear Solid 4 comes around, what happens in that game is going to hit twice as hard because I did make Snake Eater come first. So I wonder what would have happened if Revenge of the Sith, if you had filmed it in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But anyway, that's in an alternate universe somewhere. But it is a masterwork. It is a great game. Again, 10 out of 10. Just because it's behind Metal Gear Solid 1 and Metal Gear Solid 4 for me, it doesn't mean anything. Those are 10 out of 10 games as well. Metal Gear Solid 2 is a 10 out of 10 for me too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't care what anybody says about the complex plot. I think that is a 10 out of 10 game. But yeah, it's a hell of a game. So I guess in conclusion, what I'd like to say is this. If you haven't played the game yet and you're still watching this for whatever reason, just wait until the remake comes out.
Or you can go buy and you can go get the Master Collection Volume 1 of Metal Gear that's available on every single console, including the Switch. And it's actually not that bad of a port on the Switch.
So, and then you know what you can do? Do what we're going to do. Go ahead and play that, and then play the remake. And then compare, and then see how they did. But I'm actually very intrigued to see how people who are not familiar with the Metal Gear Solid franchise actually react to Metal Gear Solid, because they're going to be playing it for the first time without any previous knowledge of the previous game. So in many ways, this is going to be their first game. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Much like kids who never saw the original trilogy, which is hard to imagine, but there's some kids out there who never saw the original trilogy of Star Wars before they saw the prequels. And therefore, it was a totally different experience for them going in chronological order, just like how new gamers who never played the originals are going to go in chronological order for this one. So it's going to be very intriguing to see how people take to that for the people who unfortunately didn't play the original games. Anyway, this has been a fantastic episode, man. Thanks for doing this with me.
It's a long time coming, man.
It was a long time. We're talking years, man, like 5 years. I mean, it's kind of a big deal.
Almost the amount of time that passed between Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah, longer. It was 3 years in between Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 3, and we took 5. Every time I say that, but anyway, I'm gonna enjoy the rest of this a little later. But thank you all for watching the All-Time Gaming Series. I hope you enjoyed this retrospective. And again, leave some comments. Let us know what you think about the game. What are your rankings? What are your favorite boss fights? What are your favorite aspects of the game? We'd love to hear from you guys. But until our next video, I'm Steve.
And I'm Andres.
Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.